I guess we'll call to order, and then could we take the roll?
Yes. From the library board, Heather Barkholtz,
Here.
Sandy Patelli,
Here.
Rohit Vaidya. From the library staff, Steve Baker,
Here.
Shweta Hetzler,
Here.
Lynn Montague,
Here.
and Erin Williams Hart. I am here.
Great, thank you so much. Next on the agenda is approval of the May 6th, 2020 minutes. Could I get a motion?
I will move to approve, although reading them, I was trying to remember this meeting from a year ago.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Lynn.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I saw some
Aye.
hand waves. If you're opposed, please speak up. Citizen appearance or public comment. Are there any public comments or appearances?
No, and I did not receive any emails.
Okay, so then business of the committee chairperson. I would like to introduce, we have a representative here from Wills, Melissa. I guess, would you mind just kind of introducing yourself? And then I'll kind of introduce what the reason we asked you to be here, if you don't mind.
I'm happy to. So my name is Melissa McLymans, and I know a few of you on this call already because I worked with you on the strategic plan from a few years ago. So Lynn, Rex, Steve, you all are familiar to me, so it's great to see you. So I am a consultant at Wills, which is Wisconsin Library Services, and Wills is a nonprofit membership organization. Our members, we have about 600 or so that come from different library types across the state, so public, academic, and special. And I work primarily in consulting with public libraries and public library systems, and a lot of that is strategic planning work, and then working with libraries to do prioritization exercises as well. And I think that's why you brought me here today.
Yep. Thank you so much, Melissa. So now I'll just take a moment to kind of explain why we're choosing to be a little bit more aggressive with this strategic plan for the next year than traditionally. I think that with 2020 being such an unprecedented year, and now we're poised to start to resume full service and kind of reintegrate with the customers in a more in contact way. I think it's a moment that we could really grasp and utilize to not go back to how things were, but to spring forward and it be more inclusive and more aware of challenges people face as we move towards this reintegration. I think it's really important to engage with the staff because they're going to carry out any of the initiatives or policies that the board recommends and the committee recommends, and also to hear the voices of the board members on the three lenses that we're going to focus on moving forward, which is reopening and racial literacy and the service to those most impacted by the pandemic. So as we kind of retool and reprioritize our strategic plan for the next year, I wanted to make sure that we had a mechanism to hear the voices of the people that are impacted at the most frontline level, and that's the staff and the board. And I think that their experiences and feelings and needs need to be heard, and that we can really benefit from pausing a moment and doing the work to allow for that data to be collected and then consider it as we generate the goals for the coming year. And also, I think it's an opportunity because a lot of the ideas, we may get a little bit more than we bargained for when we send out the survey to staff, which we'll kind of talk about today. But I think a lot of the ideas we may get, I hope that they might seed future initiatives for the next iteration of the strategic plan.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
What is the committee doing to develop the written report that will be due in July?
And it's my understanding that the written report will be a summary of accomplishments and plan for the next year. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, for the past year,
So there's no forward-looking aspect at all.
not the way, have you read the strategic plan?
Yes.
Okay, if you look at the report section, it talks about the report of the accomplishments for the past year,
Okay.
which is what my expectation is from this committee for July.
Okay.
And I would like to know what you're doing.
So Rex, I'm sorry, if I could interrupt for just
Of
a second.
course.
And when we met as a board in April, I gave a brief verbal report as to what we accomplished this past year, including some things that even early 2021 that we've accomplished. So those are items that we can definitely include in that report. What we bring to the board in June, the full board in June, will be our priorities for the remaining of 2021 and for 2022. That's what we did last year when we reported to the board.
So then I need to ask, if you're working on developing some mechanism to get input from staff, what are you doing to get input from our patrons?
I have not explored that. We were really focused on getting input from the staff and hoping that through that input from the staff that we would provide a better service to the patrons. Because we want to ensure.
If we're talking about changing any priorities, or that it's not from staff, this plan was developed based on a survey of 1,100 people in the community. And
Right.
staff had an opportunity to participate in that. I don't think it would be appropriate to adjust this plan in any way based on input only from staff and not include our patrons.
Rex, again, if I could interject here, I don't think the purpose of the meetings, the strategic planning committee meetings for this year, April, May, and June, are to change the plan, because the strategic plan is actually a plan that's in place 2017 to 2022. It was a
Right.
5-year plan. The purpose of these meetings, as we've been meeting annually, is to create our roadmap for the year ahead, specifically 2022, but also looking at our current year. But the current year's priorities have been laid out. They were laid out exactly a year ago at this time.
Right.
So moving forward, this committee will help prioritize what we would like to accomplish for the rest of this year, as well as for next year. And that will help us with any budget initiatives or projects that we want to work on.
And I understand that. All I'm saying is, if that's the task, limiting input to just staff isn't true to the plan. If you're going to do it, then you need to develop some mechanism to get input from our patrons.
And I felt that that was outside of the scope, given the timeline, and that getting input from staff would be a mechanism or an exercise in understanding what tools they need and what we need to do to make them feel safe to provide service to the patrons.
Then how are you going to accomplish that by May 10th?
Asking the staff.
Yeah,
That's why we asked for an additional month to be added before we report it out. So instead of reporting in June, we're reporting in July.
I guess I'm not understanding. If
Yeah, I feel like I'm not communicating well. So I apologize for not, this isn't a gutting of the strategic plan or it's just, I wanted to try to get input before we identified goals because I don't feel equipped to
we're not
identify.
setting any goals in the strategic plan. They're set.
But
They're
you,
locked in until 2022. We
okay,
have
well,
5
without the
areas.
input from staff, I don't know how to prioritize them.
There's nothing to prioritize. They are prioritized.
Maybe I can
And I
interject.
guess I don't
and
understand the purpose.
Let me, if I can just have a moment here. So we typically just meet twice, the strategic planning committee. We meet April and May, and then we present to the library board in June. Because of the unusual circumstances of last year and this year, and probably the year ahead of us, we decided to take an extra month. So we're meeting, this group is meeting in April, May, and June, and we will still report out to the library board in June because this meeting will take place prior to the library board meeting. What we've done, what the strategic plan has is 5 initiatives.
Right.
And within those 5 initiatives, we come up with goals for the following year. The goals for the following year have not yet been established. What we can do with this questionnaire or survey that could go to the entire staff, if that's what we decide to do today, would give us some foundation for this committee to work with in order to establish our goals within the strategic plan for 2022.
That makes sense. But then that has no relationship at all to reopening or the questions here that are based, the open-ended questions on the reopening. It seems like apples and oranges to me.
Well, that might be part of today's work then, is the refinement of this questionnaire. So I think that's a good place to maybe start. The reason that those are the questions that we see in front of us now is because the goals for 2021 were those following items: a safe reopening with a continuity of services to those most impacted by the pandemic, and racial literacy. Now, moving ahead to 2022, those may continue to be our priorities, and or we may have others. So I think this was what we had to work with Melissa. We did not establish any goals within the strategic plan or priorities because that's the work of this committee. So the questions that were developed in this questionnaire are based on what we have or what we have
Right.
up till now. And if you look on our website, actually, we have the strategic, the goals of our strategic, our priorities, I should say, are for the library's priorities for 2021 to 2022, because whenever we meet during this time, we set the priorities for the current year and the years ahead, as long as this strategic plan is in place. So last year when we met, we had our priorities for 21 and 2022. So those were actually in place, and that is on our website. If you want, I can share the screen to pull that up if that would help. Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
Okay. Hold on, let me.
Shweta, I have it pulled up if it's easier for me to share.
Oh, okay. Well, I have it here, so I can. I just had to pull it up first. You see that?
Yep.
So this was the library's priorities for 2021 and 2022. So, and the boxed area highlights the projects within. So initiative number 1 was work on a safe and measured reopening. And then initiative number 2 is funding and staffing. And that's establishing staff resources and services to assist residents most affected by COVID-19. Initiative number 3 is access. Initiative number 4 is partnerships. And then initiative number 5 is marketing and communications. I can leave this up as we discuss, or I can stop sharing, either way.
So I guess I'm just being dense as can be here today, but given the survey that I reviewed, what's your plan for taking the results and plugging it into this format?
We're hoping to get feedback on the survey so that we can better do that exact thing. That's why we want to have the conversation. It's just a starting point, if I'm understanding.
Can you give me a specific example?
Let
I
me pull
wonder-
up.
I wonder if it would be helpful if I could just walk you through the Imagine process of what we might do in the next few months, really, in order to do exactly what you're asking, Rex. And I'll say this, zooming out a little bit, I don't think we are changing your strategic plan. We're going to keep within your big goals, those initiatives. Those are not changing. What we want to do is try to find what are those, I'm thinking about them as projects in my head, the work that the library staff and the board potentially will be focusing on in the next year.
I've got that answer.
Okay, that's all we're kind of.
Expansion, period. That's what we're doing.
There are some other lenses in which folks are going to be doing their work, I imagine, throughout the next year. But would it be helpful if I show you what I'm thinking about as a process, and then we can kind of think about where we might fine tune it, what might not work, what will work. And really the intention here is to try to get some staff feedback in terms of what can be done in the next year to meet the goals that have already been established by the library and the board.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now and try to pull up a doc. I think I also will drop it into chat so you can look at it with me. Let's see if I can actually do all of the things that I just promised you. Chat, there it is. All right. So on this document, this is just the big picture overview of the process that I worked out a little bit with Heather and Shweta. So first of all, we're going to start with this planning team meeting. So congratulations, you've already started the process. And at this process, we want to review this document, see if it feels right. If it does, we can move on and look at that questionnaire a little bit more critically. That's just the starting point, as Heather pointed out. The outcome of this meeting then would be a more fully drafted questionnaire. And that questionnaire is intended simply, it really is for board and staff. And we can talk about what a survey might look like if you wanted to do patron feedback, but that would be a very long-term process. And I would imagine you might want to do that more for a full strategic planning process, which is kind of in your near future. So the step 2 would be that we would share the questionnaire then, and then I would compile those results for you and bring that back to this team so that you could review them. There would be homework in the meantime in which I would ask this committee to take a look at that. And if I click on this, hopefully it's showing you again that summary of projects. I would want this committee to take a look at that at the same time, because there might be things on that list that you've either completed, are no longer relevant, or you want to push over into the next year. They still need to be accomplished, right? So that would be a second thing. And what I would propose to do for that is I'll build you a fairly simple kind of Google spreadsheet that you can work in together in order to kind of decide, is this something we move forward on? Is it something we already did? Is it something that maybe isn't meeting the conditions right now? It's just not a thing that we need to worry about at this point because something has changed. So after that, we would go into a second planning team meeting, which I think right now is scheduled for May 6th. We would review the questionnaire results. We would then add any projects that you all think might be missing that just didn't get picked up, but you know are important and we need to talk about. And then I would introduce a prioritization process. If not, I mean, we might even be able to start it depending on what we get back from the questionnaire and that data gathering. But basically the outcome of that meeting would be a full list of projects, not prioritized necessarily, just kind of a brainstorm of things. And then an understanding of next steps. That understanding of next steps would be a prioritization process that you all would work on outside of the meeting. And I would keep an eye on that document. And then we would finish up on June 3rd by reviewing that work and deciding these are certainly the things that we want to focus on in the coming year. So the outcome for that meeting would be the prioritized list of projects. Does that make sense as an overall process?
Actually, it does, yes.
Okay. Any other, I mean, from the rest of the folks on the call, does that make sense to you all? Is it, okay.
Do we want to continue the conversation on whether or not this is worthwhile? Because I don't want to get deep in the weeds on the questions, right? If there's not a consensus. So I think that is worth discussing. So I guess, Rex, do you still have hesitancy now that Melissa and Sveta have explained much more eloquently than I have?
I understand the process now, and that alleviates my initial concerns. To be frank with you, I'm still very uncomfortable and only asking staff, but it's not practical at this point to try to go out and ask patrons. And as Melissa said, it'd be a very long process. So as a way of providing assistance to the board, just outlining those projects and then having the board set the priorities, this seems to make sense to me.
Right. So from my perspective, it's an exercise in gathering data that we may not see for consideration. So nothing is written in stone, and like has been harped on, we're not touching the strategic plan. It's more an identifying the details of the goals and projects for the next coming year.
And one project that might be identified, for example, might be to do some sort of patron feedback gathering, right? It might not be that you wait a whole year for a big survey. Maybe there's some touch points throughout the year in which you can gather feedback from folks in other ways. So that could be something that does get put into this year's priorities. And that might be very important, especially with reopening, those sorts of things, absolutely.
So I guess with that, unless if there's anyone else that has a hesitancy, I mean, now would be the time to talk about it and mention it. I get that it's non-traditional what we're doing, but I guess I'm just feeling really non-traditional because 2020 has made me like much more comfortable with doing things in a weird way. Okay, well, I guess if not, we can move on in the agenda. So then that would be the staff report.
Yep, nothing to report.
And there's no unfinished business. So then the new business would be consideration, discussion, and possible action on an overview of the process. We kind of did that. Is there anything that we want to discuss about the process as a whole, maybe in a finer detail than the higher level discussion of whether or not to do it? If not, we can move on to, do I need a motion to do or anything? Do I? No. We can have consideration, discussion, and possible action on the questionnaire. So if we want to talk about the questions that are here and see if they, now that we understand the goal and the process, are these questions in pursuit of that?
Yeah, I agree. I think this would be a good point because we definitely have the time today to maybe even refine, once we have a clear understanding of what our goal is for this questionnaire, maybe refine the questions that we're asking, so that staff that participate, board members that participate will feel like they can be successful in answering the questions that are asked of them, and that will have an outcome that we can really work with.
Just in terms of format, I kind of have a question for Melissa, I guess. I'm a really old-fashioned survey guy, and open-ended questions scare the bedevil out of me. Because the question always is, what do you do with the answers that you get? So I'm wondering if the open-ended questions could be reformatted to give people choices rather than just getting what ends up being anecdotal information. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, as somebody who has to analyze surveys, open-ended questions can certainly be a challenge. In this case, I'm not thinking of this as a survey, and I think that this is important. This is not some research tool that's scientific. What I'm trying to do is gather a lot of ideas from folks on staff and the board, and then look at those ideas. Rex, do you remember when we went through strategic planning 4 years ago, I think it was, and we did community conversations and we asked open-ended questions to different people, and we weren't interested necessarily in having everybody line up underneath. Also, my dog is starting to bark, so I apologize, but you know how it is working from home. So what we were looking for there were big themes that emerged from the different conversations. And that's what I expect to kind of get from this questionnaire. Some of them are going to be pretty precise, like we should think about doing this project work in order to accomplish this goal. But what we as a committee will be wanting to look for are, where are those kind of consensus showing up? Where are more people saying this is something that we should be directed on? And that will help you think about what the priorities might be because you have some buy-in from your staff. So I'm not too worried about open-ended questions in this case. It's fulfilling a purpose that I think is important for staff and board to express ideas. I would like them to try to be creative and open in their ideas. And then this group, this committee can kind of decide, are these things that meet our priority lenses, right? Those things that we talked about up front. And are they achievable? Is it really something that we're going to be able to do And then you use that to prioritize the work more formally. That list also, whatever is generated from this, you'll have that going forward. It will be saved for you in a spreadsheet. I'm sure it will be a spreadsheet from me for you that you will have then, and you can use that for a couple different purposes. One, if you somehow magically get through your list of to-dos for the year, you can pull from that for this, particular year. Or you can also use it as a master list for future strategic planning, right? So if you are going to go through a more thorough process, you have this kind of set in list already from the staff that came up with ideas. So for me, the intent is actually to be very open, and I'll take the time to organize these ideas as much as possible. So if I see that people are largely saying the same thing multiple times, you're only going to probably see that once in the priority list that I return to you. I can give you all the raw data and you can check my work, but what I want to bring to you, to this group, is a more formatted, refined list, even from that raw information. It will be themes. It will be like ideas where people are coming together. There might also be, and this is, who knows what we'll get. There might be like one person that has the best idea, and this group is going to say, that is brilliant, and we absolutely have to do that this year. That was kind of long-winded, I apologize.
Can I also just say that I think that an open-ended questionnaire would be a lot more daunting if this was going out to hundreds of people.
Yeah.
But when it's limited to just our library staff, which, 35-ish, and probably most people will respond, but you always have a few who don't. So I think that that amount of data, even if it is open-ended, to me still seems workable, especially if Melissa's doing the work and not the rest of us.
It's always less daunting when you have somebody else that does it.
And I will say we have quite a few new staff on at the library, so that are not familiar with our strategic plan. So this would be a nice way to, in some ways, orient them to the fact that we have this strategic plan. We try to do an onboarding, or we do an onboarding every year, but it's been so different, the onboarding process this past year, because of COVID. So this gives us an opportunity to showcase the strategic plan itself. And I'm wondering if maybe the questions that are asked could be asked and framed around the 5 initiatives, so that, we can introduce the strategic plan, say that within the strategic plan, we're looking at these 5 areas, facilities and spaces, funding and staffing, and then have questions within each of those. And I know that's what you've drafted here. So maybe that could be at least the framework that we're looking at.
Would it be helpful if I shared my screen at this point and we took a look at that questionnaire just to
Sure.
review it?
Yeah, and I think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think one of the concerns, and Rex, correct me if I'm wrong, that Rex has is, what do we do with information that we either can't do anything about? So that might be, and that, I think we have to be prepared for that too.
Mm-hmm. But that's still an opportunity to talk about that. But I guess it depends on the content. So sometimes just acknowledging that a project is a great idea, but there isn't the money or bandwidth at the time, is still useful.
Mhm.
Reading some of the questions, I love the questions about inclusion, and like, how as a staff do you feel included, and how do you think the community feels included? The questions that give me a little bit of pause are the 2 questions, or especially about what will make you feel safe when the library opens. And the only reason that gives me a little pause is because I feel like giving that to staff now seems like it's too late. Do you know what I mean? Because
or possibly too early. Maybe we need to be open for a bit longer to say, now that we've been open,
Yeah, like it needs to be rephrased or reframed, like what will continue to make you feel safe, or, something along those lines. Because otherwise it sounds like we won't reopen unless you feel safe, or, or I don't know, I'm not being very eloquent, but my gut level as a staff member makes it seem like it's being asked at the wrong time. If that makes sense at all.
I think that's, yeah. Because you all have been at the library for a long time already. So
Yeah.
you've been interacting in person with patrons and each other. So I definitely hear.
Kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah.
So it's like, what will continue to make you feel safe, or something or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Where it's more an acknowledgement of the process.
Right.
Agreed.
And also that we, like, something we always have been talking about for a while now is that we have been open, and that this is just another stage of reopening. So this is like the next stage of reopening. So it's not when the library reopens, it's as we enter the next stage, or as we continue to reopen, or, as we reopen further, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it
or as-
acknowledges that we are open, that we are
Right.
not closed right now.
Yeah, because right now we're not a walkthrough library, but on May 10th, that's the next level we'll be at. And I wonder, Melissa, if it might help our staff in this question to maybe give a brief list of the things that are in place with their safety in mind. So, obviously vaccinations are widely available now, hand sanitizing stations, masks, people are wearing masks, and that will be continued. We will continue to enforce that. Social distancing among staff. Staying home when you're not feeling well. And maybe the question for the community can be reframed in that same way.
Mhm.
So do those read a bit better?
I think so. It has a better feel to it, I think.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and I think for the community, just maybe not social distancing among staff, but among, occupancy limits, time limits, continuing to offer drive up service.
Great. Okay.
So for the next two questions, then, do those work as is?
Well, do we want to ask, what do you think would make community members? Or do we want to ask, what do you think makes community members feel included?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, that matches the staff question.
Like
And I
what
think
makes you
that-
feel included and what makes community members feel included so that they're the same purpose. Like currently.
Heather, did I hear you say the board, you expect the board to also take this questionnaire?
I'm hoping.
Okay,
I think I missed a little bit.
Oh.
Which one would you prefer the phrasing of? Do you want it to be kind of currently or future facing? I'm so sorry.
I think currently would be
Okay.
my preference, but I mean, we're a committee, so.
But for the patron, I mean, suppose both for the patron and the staff question, could we do both current and future? So what, I'm thinking particularly of patrons, what do you think makes community members feel included? What could the library do better or more of to make community members feel included? I don't know if
Maybe
that's
what-
too
I would
much
say
of the
what-
same.
What about what
Question.
else could the library do?
Yeah.
Instead of what could we do better or what, just
Mhm.
what else could we do?
Because certainly that may have changed over the last year.
maybe the same question, what else might the library do for that could
Yeah,
be
for staff.
the staff as
Mm.
well?
actually, that information could be funneled when we have it operating right into our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee.
That's a great idea. And it might give them a little bit more of a starting point to talk about initiatives or whatever they're going to generate for the board. So now that those questions have been revamped a little bit, are there any other modifications anyone would like to see?
If I could actually just ask a couple questions to you, Heather, just because for me, this might help this group think about things that we could change. And there's two big questions that I have, I think, that would help me. One is when we ask these questions of staff in particular, I think, do you want all new ideas? Do you want them to also be thinking about those being kind of all future ideas, or is it things that are currently being done that support those areas? Because if I was taking this questionnaire as a staff member, I might want that clarified. Both have value for this committee, I think, but I think we do want to be clear on that. And I'm not sure exactly the best path for your library.
I think, sorry.
Yep, go ahead, please.
Under initiative 3 in our 2021 to 2022 summary of projects, that initiative lists explore service options, and essentially without rereading it is kind of explore which of the modifications made to the library to accommodate the pandemic should stay. And I think that so focusing on current and future, at least from my perspective, would help answer the questions in that initiative. Or at least start to identify what's working, what's liked, what has benefits that go beyond a pandemic. But that's just my opinion. So if anyone else has thoughts, and then Melissa, I'm sorry I cut you off if you.
No, I think that's good, Heather. I think it gives the staff like a really good springboard.
I think if you were to modify those questions so that instead of saying what projects should the library undertake, maybe say continue or undertake.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's great. It's a nice simple fix too.
Mhm.
And just assume that I'm going to do that to each of these.
And I think for, I think for the group here is pretty well versed with the strategic plan and what library facilities and spaces even means. So it might help the rest of the staff when they're taking this questionnaire, when we say libraries, strategic initiative 1, library facilities and spaces, maybe, thinking about the current space and the future space as we think about expansion.
You raise another question, I think that I have for this questionnaire to be easily understood by everyone who's taking it. As you mentioned, you have some new staff members that might not be as familiar with the strategic plan as others. Will folks taking this survey understand what is included in library facility and spaces, in access, in communication marketing? Do you need any descriptive language that would help contextualize those initiatives?
I think we absolutely do. We have a lot of staff we have quite a few staff who actually got hired during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
who they don't know the library outside of COVID. So in fact,
That's a unique perspective to
right.
have, right? Do you think that, so in the strategic plan under each initiative, there's just a sentence that kind of explains the high level goal? Do you think that's adequate, or would an example of some of the goals and activities called out would be, I don't want to overwhelm with text,
Right.
but where's the sweet spot?
I feel like we have the same brain, Heather, because I had this all pulled up. This really wasn't rehearsed. I was like, well, we could use this language if that is helpful.
I think that one sentence is probably, or I'm thinking about someone that a staff member who's only worked at the library during the pandemic, who I had a long conversation with today. I'm thinking about some of the library services that I realized she doesn't quite understand. Just because she's never seen them outside the pandemic. Thinking about her perspective, trying to think of through her eyes. I think that one sentence, like the heading and the sentence, would be sufficient, I think.
Okay.
They're all smart people. They just need, more information.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, because one of the things that we did through this strategic plan was begin to envision a dedicated teen space, but it's on pause now. I mean, things are, it will be ready to go, but that could be something easy for someone to conceptualize that is a possibility for the library now.
And could we link this in the introduction? So if someone hasn't read it in a while or saw it when we're onboarding, but they were in information overload, they could review if there were questions?
I will experiment. I was going to do this in Google Forms, and I don't want to lie to anyone here. I think I can link from that intro, but I'm not sure. And if I can't, a solution would be that, Shweta, you might email the staff this, and there could be the introduction would be more in the email and less in the form, so that they have those instructions. And that might be a pretty easy solution to that. So you could reference the full plan. You could reference last year, the 2021-22 document as well, so they can see what they're starting to shape with this committee.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And we have, just like every other organization, we have some staff that will really dig in and read this plan very thoroughly. And then we may have others that might go straight to the questionnaire. So if the questionnaire can be self-sufficient, that will also help.
Yeah.
Okay.
But making both available may help
Yeah.
anyone that wants to dig in, because like I kind of intermix these two documents in my mind, which is where I think a lot of the confusion came from
I have,
when I
and
explained
I
it.
have quite a few physical copies of it, so I could even put one in everyone's mailbox too.
Okay. So I will, when I build this, add this short descriptive sentence to each of the initiatives so survey takers can easily understand what we're talking about there. I think that makes good sense. Let's, if you don't mind, we could take a look at, so each initiative essentially asks the same couple of questions, right? Which is, what could we do in what projects should the library undertake or continue for this initiative? And the second question is a little more, you know, like why? How does it fit into those overarching kind of big vision pictures? And I'm gonna make you dizzy and swing back up here. And that was these four priority. I'm calling them lenses, right? So as people are thinking about the work that they currently do or could do, these are the four priority lenses. And this was through a meeting with Heather and Shweta that we talked about this. And the only one that's on addition on here is the expansion design. The other three we've kind of touched on. So having everyone kind of keep those, these are the top priorities. So when you're coming up with the project for these initiatives, does it do something for safe reopening? Maybe it also, you know, hits on the service to those most impacted. You know, these are the four areas that we're asking them to kind of root their ideas out of. So the second question is always going to be like, how do those activities do the thing within those priority areas? Does that make sense? Did I say that clearly, or was it confusing?
I understood. Could I propose changing the language of the question a little bit?
Absolutely.
So maybe, how do the projects meet one or more of the priority areas, and are any adjustments necessary? Or something along those lines, to allow for, if something's close but not quite, could be easily expanded a little bit or shifted to cover those lenses, if that makes any sense. But I'd like to hear from others if there are other reactions to the current language.
Would, I guess, Heather, would you even go as far as to say that the open-ended question shouldn't be specific to any initiative? Maybe just lay out what the initiatives are, and knowing what the initiatives are, knowing what those, you know, that expansion, safe reopening, services to most impacted, and racial literacy are in our priority. Maybe just ask what projects should the library continue or undertake to effectively meet any of the above initiatives.
Honestly, I think the way Shweta just said it makes, I have a really hard time looking at this, the questions part, and like reading it, or like having it like make sense in my brain, or like it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense at the same time. I have a hard time reading it. And the way Shweta just said it makes more sense in my brain.
It might give people a chance to really to speak to what their interests and their strengths are.
If we go that route, though, it seems to me, then you're talking about two different questionnaires. What you just explained, Shweta, is very general and has to do with those four Lindas, not related to the plan. And I'm more interested in what's related to the plan, because that's the specific mission of this committee and what it's to present to the board in July.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we want to definitely have those 5 initiatives within the strategic plan introduced to staff, explained to staff. And what we've been doing is looking at the safe reopening under the lens of library facilities and spaces, or funding and staffing, or access, marketing and communications. Looking at it that way, like what projects should the library continue to do or undertake in order to meet any of the 5 initiatives, or a combination thereof.
So let me pose this question to you all. And that is, what if we just got rid of that secondary question for each of the initiatives? If it's framed that they should be thinking about those 4 lenses when they come up with their projects, do we need the second question, the follow-up question at all? Or is that just making them do something that?
I kind of see that part of it maybe as our work, so that we get the input from the staff as to what projects they would like to see across those 5 initiatives. And then it's our task to go through those and prioritize based on our current priorities. And
I
if
agree with
anything,
Erin.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is possible in Google Forms, but you could, for each project suggestion, there could be just like a checkbox or a radio button of this project fits this. I'm getting confused between my initiatives and my priorities. Fits this priority to kind of help guide them in thinking along that lines. But when I was reading through this, kind of like what Lynn said, all these questions, and how do you see it's one thing for staff to give input on what kind of projects we should do, but for them to have to go the extra step of how do you see the projects meeting one or more of these priority areas, I feel like that's going to put a lot more staff, like, this is out of my purview. And I think, so I feel like we could probably eliminate that secondary question altogether, knowing that we do have that explanation up top.
I agree. And I think it takes, they can come up with ideas that are just what they feel are, that come front to mind for them. And it's then up to this committee to see if it fits within any of our initiatives. And then within any of our initiatives, does it fit? What priorities does that help us address?
I think your staff members will appreciate having a shorter survey too.
I was just about, to comment that you might get a higher response rate if the questions are fewer in number.
I think simplifying things is a good thing, like just making something simpler will make it more accessible.
Yeah.
It looked a little overwhelming originally.
Yeah, I think in this, when we introduce this to staff, we can give a highlight and overview of the strategic plan, and then say for the full plan, you can, and have it a link to the full plan, but at least they have the framework here that they can successfully respond to, so that we can get the necessary outcome to help us move forward.
I like simple. So that's basically each initiative will just have the one question. Think about funding and staffing and what projects with those lenses in mind. And we'll probably get some answers back that aren't going to fit those lenses, but they might still be good ideas that you want to have. So that's okay. If we continue on, there's only one other question
Can I go back for a moment for those strategic initiative questions?
Mhm.
Some of them have in parentheses some ideas listed and some of them don't. And I tend to be a very literal person, so it wasn't quite clear to me. Were those just examples, or are those, you know, if I'm a staff member reading through this, I wouldn't be sure if the projects should be limited to what was in parentheses. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think, Shweta, actually, you might have put some of those in there. So were you thinking about those as
I
examples?
didn't think we want to put them in the question, but you know, do we want, and especially if we're not going to have that second question, and maybe that was me trying to make sense of how we're going to ask staff for that input, because I don't even know that it needs to be asked. They may have a suggestion that maybe is very far from what any of us have been thinking about, that will make a lot of sense.
I mean, I think you could leave those in and maybe add a couple to the ones that don't have examples, but make it clear that these are just example projects. That might actually help some staff members who aren't sure exactly what this initiative means to understand what kind of projects would fall within that.
And I think, yeah, that's a great suggestion, Aaron. And I think every question should have examples. That way the questions are equally weighted, if you will.
It might even be an example of something we know we have to do, you know.
Maybe something we don't do that we want to do, that we already know we want to do.
Right, so for strategic initiative 1, library facilities and spaces, we can say begin schematic design process.
And we could say updated teen area, even though, because it's almost done. The furniture is all in a pile, you know?
Yeah, or updated discussion rooms, you know, something,
Yeah.
something that we know
Like tangible.
that we plan to do this year. It just hasn't happened yet.
Okay. I feel like we're pretty sure we want to get rid of that second follow-up
Yeah,
question. Okay.
I think so. I think so. I think it might almost be redundant.
I think so. Too homeworky too. Now tell me why you wanted to do that. Okay, funding and staffing. The projects that, the examples here, are those sufficient? Do you want to add a couple examples, change the wording of these examples?
Yeah, I think we should be consistent and have examples that we
I think I can see people being, well, what does supporting staff?
Right.
Yeah, I think
Like what does
yeah.
that mean?
I think continuing education or professional development for sure makes sense.
Training for staff on emergency procedures and policies. Would that fit?
Yeah, I see that that's listed as in the summary of projects under initiative 2. And I guess I'm interested in seeing, you know, however this survey ends up looking on the screen, that we somehow make it clear that we already have these summary of projects and these ideas here. And then like the one question is related to that initiative and its projects. And then, you know, whatever other projects staff things might be, might work to accomplish the same goal. I guess I'm just having a hard time, you know, relating the question back to this initiative in the summary of projects document that we have. because then there's like this other graphic of like a orange bar with a funding and staffing priority centered under it that I don't really get how that relates to the other things.
Maybe you could help me understand, last year, how did those pull-out statements get determined?
Those were pulled out based on those 3 lenses of safe reopening, service to most impacted, and racial literacy.
And
So
did you, I'm sorry, did you develop those after, I mean, in the committee, how did you come to those phrases?
we looked at I'm trying to remember the best I can. It's been a while, but when we looked at the actual to-dos or the projects or the lists of things that we wanted to do or were in process, we wanted all of our priorities to relate back to these 5 initiatives. So when we're looking at access, there's a lot there, you know, whether it's technology or technology, digital collections. Those were pretty easy in saying that we wanted to make sure that patrons could access our resources that way. Same thing with partnerships. I think the emphasis there was probably going to be on that service to those most impacted, as well as racial literacy.
So this is what we're asking staff to comment on, is the specific ideas that we have here, plus add their own ideas?
I was actually thinking more the original, strategic plan as it was developed back in 2017.
The more this sort of thing?
Yeah, something that was broader than, because that was the list of projects that we came up with last year that we may still be doing or we may not be doing. Are you thinking, Steve, that we should include that list of projects that were determined last year for staff to react to?
Well, I guess I want them, when I see the question, strategic initiative number 1, library facility and spaces. Then how do you see the projects meeting one or more of these priority areas? I don't know what projects you're referring to. I don't know I see the priority areas listed there, but I don't understand how those are related to these projects, and then how that's related to strategic initiative number 1 and what library facility and spaces means. I understand what those things mean because I'm familiar with all the other documents, but I think staff who maybe haven't spent time looking at these or haven't even seen them at all, it might be confusing. And I'm just wondering, what sort of design and layout each question is going to have. If it is really just 4 questions or 5 questions, asking how they see projects meeting one or more priority areas, like what sort of introductory text or documentation are we going to be giving them to make each question easily answerable?
Yeah, so in what I think that is that under the first question here for strategic initiative number 1, library facilities and spaces, we should offer that definition there, what we're trying to do here.
I'll make it look better later, I promise.
So Melissa, you're our expert. How do we accomplish what Steve just explained?
Well, I think we need to just simplify. First of all, we're not going to ask them anymore how those projects do the thing, right? What I would envision is we're going to send some sort of introductory email at this point, right? Or however you want to communicate this out to folks. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And this is how we want you to think about the set of questions that follow. And the way we would ask them to think about those questions would be through these. What we would ask them to do is, when you're really thinking about your ideas, try to keep these in mind. As does it do one or more of these things? It's okay if people come up with ideas that don't match those, I think. Your committee's job is to then say, that's a great idea. I really love that idea, but it doesn't really fit into our priorities for this year. Or you say, it doesn't fit into our priorities this year, but we still have to do it. It's that good of an idea. That's the committee's kind of decision. This is just a way to maybe help your questionnaire takers do a little bit of like prioritization work on the front end, right? So that they're not just feeling like they have to give every single thing that they do that provide some sort of project for facilities or for access, because you could end up with a pretty long list in that way. So that's what I would do. I would just kind of do a simple explanation, give some background information, the strategic plan. This summary, I'm not sure. It helps me to understand that the committee came up with those pullouts, right? Those weren't, you came up with a list of projects and then you decided how you wanted to kind of really then articulate thematically, I guess, maybe those priorities. I don't know if you want to do that again this year. That really is a great question, I think. And I don't know if you can answer that right now or if you have to see what information comes back. So Steve, I don't know if that was kind of rambling, but I think that simplifying the questionnaire, making the language very clear about what you're asking folks to do in either the introduction or in an email out, those would be the two solutions that I would offer.
As I'm looking at the introduction prior to the questions, I'm realizing we all know that these strategic initiatives mentioned in the questions come from the library's strategic plan, which we all know is an actual document that's been prepared. I suspect there are staff members that don't know that, and I think we need to be more explicit about saying the strategic initiatives as set forth in the library's strategic plan. And if you're going to be able to link to the plan, that would be the place to link to it.
Absolutely.
I just experimented, and in Google Forms, you can put as many links as you want. Like in each question, a link could be made.
All right, I will do so many links. I'm just kidding. There will be 2 links.
Oh, yeah, you can link away in Google Forms. I just tested it out.
And I think in order to emphasize that the focus of this is on those 5 initiatives, is to start with that rather than the lenses in which we've been looking at things this past year.
Okay. So
and then we can wordsmith some of that too, off, outside of this meeting too.
Yeah, why don't I, after this meeting tomorrow, rework that, reorder it so that the strategic plan is prioritized in any text. So that's our big framework. Then one way to think about the priorities of the library are through these lenses that it's just a suggestion in a sense. And then your job though, as the committee, would be to really, that's how you'll kind of package your work. Does that make sense? But I can take a crack at that language and then send it back to whomever on this call to take a look at it. I can do it also, keep it in Google Docs so people can comment and edit. Just feel free to jump in there. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at like our initiative number 4 with partnerships, and we've done a lot of work in this area, but it's maybe not necessarily with the organizations that are all listed there. We've had some new partnerships emerge, so that's, but I mean, that's obviously getting way into the weeds for staff. So I want to make the process simple and achievable for them.
So in pursuit of that, do we want the only link to be to the strategic plan? Just to keep them focused and not get lost in the weeds of the projects? Or do you think it's important to draw their attention to both documents?
Because this was what we outlined for 2021 into 2022
Right.
last year as a
So,
work document.
Rather than putting examples in parentheses, would it make more sense to refer to the summary of 2021 projects to say, here are examples of projects that were prioritized last year? That would also give them the foundation for what projects should we continue as opposed to just undertaking.
Mhm.
And it would
Right,
give them
and
a
then-
more complete list.
And an idea of like the work product that they
Yeah,
might be
may-
contributing to.
Yeah, and maybe just keep those examples fairly brief, you know, because there's a lot in there.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that concerns me with using examples is if they see the examples listed, are people going to think, oh, well, they're already doing those, so I'm not going to bother to write this down, and then we miss opportunities for knowing that people think even those examples we included are important. Does that make sense?
It does. I think any examples that we put in here should be fairly high level and generic for that reason. We can certainly reference the current year's priority projects in an email or in the introduction.
So even these examples here, then, like the schematic design process, an updated teen area, an updated discussion area or discussion rooms, may be too specific then, because they are very specific.
They don't feel as specific as some of these in here. Or, I mean, I think a couple illustrations, I don't think it will impact the quality of responses you get. I think people that are going to drill into this are going to drill into this and come up with some great ideas. You're also, just from my experience, you'll probably get some responses where people are just like, I don't know, I haven't worked here long enough, so it might be, and actually that's something I think that in either an email or in the introduction, one or the other, we should be explicit to people that, like, even if you haven't been here that long, we want your ideas to, since you said so many people were hired during COVID, we don't want those folks to think that they don't know or don't have anything to contribute. So that's, yeah.
And we should also give them the freedom to say if they're not sure to, that they can say so, or.
Absolutely. Okay. Let me, I think maybe I could just pull a few examples for each of these funding, staffing, access from the summary of projects that tend to be a little more generic. So let me take a try at that. I think examples can be helpful to people to help them think about what we're looking for here, without it being too, I don't know what's the right word, driving them to a certain answer. Does that make sense? And I want to circle back to you, Steve, and find out if I answered your question, if it's sufficient, or if we want to keep talking about that.
You did answer my question. I don't think we need to continue talking about it. Like you said, I mean, this is, you're working on, you know, how it's supposed to look and everything. Yeah, no, I feel like you heard my suggestions, and look forward to seeing what you do with it.
Me too. Okay, good. That makes, I don't want to leave anything. I just want to make sure that I'm capturing and hearing what folks are saying, because this is already a much better questionnaire. So thank you. All right, where are we at then here on the questionnaire?
Maybe the final question.
Yeah, the final question. So I'm just going to recap what I've so far, what I'm going to do, which is in the kind of main project development questions, we're going to add in some brief description of what this initiative is, and then a few generic-y, which is not a word, I know, projects as examples to help people just kind of frame things. But we also will write a better introduction that puts the strategic plan first and foremost, followed by the lenses. It's just a way to think about priorities. But we'll also want to link to the strategic plan and last year's, just for reference for folks to see what we're building towards. Does that capture? I'm seeing a couple of nods.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Last question on here is just a, open-ended one of, it's a way to open up some communication if people need it or want it, basically. I always like to end with it. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Because people might have some ideas or thoughts. And so I would say we should keep that at least, but it's the second part of the question that I think your feedback would be great for.
I think I like it as is, because communication has been a key sort of persistent issue among staff, as it is with many staffs and many organizations. So I think that the question as it's phrased, I hope will help staff feel that they are being heard and that we are trying to have communication going both ways.
It's an anonymous survey or questionnaire. If folks, I wonder if I should add a statement that.
I think you should add a statement that this is anonymous unless you choose to give us your name.
Yeah. And that I wonder if there's a way that I can preserve their anonymity of their answers, right? Like they could say that they have something they want to follow up with you with, but they might not want. I'm overthinking it. Never mind. I do that sometimes. I think it's okay, but we definitely, I will put it's an anonymous kind of statement on here.
I mean, you could just add something to the effect of, if you prefer to remain anonymous for the survey, please feel free to reach out to Shweta or anyone on the management team if you would like to discuss your thoughts further, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Okay.
So are there any other comments, discussion around the questionnaire? Do we want to move forward with it? Now that we've kind of fine-tuned the language and made clear the goals. I believe we'll have to take action on doing something. Is that
Yeah, you should take a vote.
okay?
And I want to express that I appreciate all your patience with me tonight. I really did not understand the purpose of this questionnaire. I do now, and you've done yeoman's work in, I think, improving the questionnaire, so good job.
Rex, I think your questions has helped us to focus a little bit on what we needed to focus on within the questionnaire. So thank you for posing them.
I agree. I think it was a really good discussion, and I think we challenged ourselves with this, and so I really appreciate that. And Steve, you too. I think you know, really saying, well, what are we actually really asking of our staff? And some of those projects that we had from last year were, some of them were pre-COVID, some were post-COVID, so it's kind of a big glob of things. So I think this will help. They will help us actually, I think, immensely. So yes, I'll let a vote be taken, and then maybe we also need to discuss timeline of when we need to push this out.
Okay, so is there a motion? To move forward with the questionnaire?
I think I'm part of this committee, so I can actually make a motion. So I'll make a motion to move forward with the questionnaire as.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Okay, so that carries. So then, yes, like Sveta said, maybe a discussion of timeline.
I think I need to go back to sharing my screen. I like actually the nice like 9 tiles. It's very pleasing to me. All right, let's go back to that process document. So I looked at a calendar at some point and put some dates in here. And I was hoping, in order to have enough time for me to do the organization of your results for the May 6th meeting, the questionnaire does need to go out pretty quickly. And I want to give people enough time, but there's not a lot of time in the calendar between now and May 6th, actually. So April 19th to 29th is what I would like to try to have the questionnaire done by, but I think the 19th must be Monday, right? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we needed a little more time for editing and for this group to, feel good with it, we could maybe just go out with the questionnaire a couple days later. Do you think like giving folks a week to do it is enough?
I think that's enough time.
Yeah, especially considering the questionnaire has been shortened.
Yeah. And
Okay.
everyone works within a week. I mean, unless someone's on vacation or something, but everyone works within a week's schedule. So,
Okay. So I'll push that out a few days. What I would like to try to do is have a redraft version to you all. I want to say tomorrow, but I know what my calendar is like. So probably Monday is when I could get it to you. And I can try to get that to you more, towards the beginning of the day than the end of it. So if I get a revised questionnaire and maybe some like intro text that you can decide if you want it in the questionnaire or as an email by Monday morning, and y'all would have then maybe a day to look at it, would you be able to get back to me maybe by Tuesday end of day, Wednesday morning?
I think so. I mean, particularly given the depth of the discussion we've had today, I think we've kind of coalesced along a direction. So hopefully it won't be a heavy lift to review for people.
Yeah. Hopefully I won't like share something that's like completely like bonkers and you're like, oh, did not leave the meeting with that feeling. So
I
Tuesday
doubt
end
it.
of day would be great, I think, because then we could finalize it Wednesday and then you would be able to share it out. Does that feel okay?
And do you want this to go to the library board as well as the staff at the same time?
I think so.
Okay,
I would need all the results. If you want the results to be considered for the May 6th meeting, I would need everyone's essentially on the same
okay.
time frame.
Sandy, Heather, and Rex, there's going to be another survey that will be going out to the library board from some questions from the Inclusive Services Toolkit. I'm hoping to get that out to the library board tomorrow. That one will be a pretty simple survey. Do you think that would be too much to have the board do both, or there'll be at least a few days in between getting both surveys?
I think they can handle it.
Okay.
So I think those are the big dates in front of us at this point. The rest of it is going to be, your meeting dates of May 6th and June 3rd. I still need to do this part here, the spreadsheet, so that you can kind of look at what is on that list of this right here, so that you can think about that from your perspective of, are we going to continue to do this? Is it a priority still? But that might be, I'm trying to think, that would be, I can get that to you once the survey is, the questionnaire is out to your staff, right? Because you can be doing that at the same time that they are taking the questionnaire, basically. So I can try to get that. I need to just try to pull up the calendar. I'm sorry. I don't know my dates off the top of my head. There's not all my appointments, I promise. If I get it to you by the end of next week, I think that should be okay. Does that seem okay? And then I mean, I'll give you reasonable deadlines on all of this. It's basically just have it done by May 6th so that we can all be looking at the same thing together.
Yeah, and I would suspect, Melissa, there may be quite a few things that are just on pause there.
I suspect you're probably right. Does that answer questions for timeline and next steps?
I believe so. So I guess that wraps up the new business. Were there any referrals? I don't believe so.
Heather,
Um,
just so the note taker is clear, we just, for new business, we just had the one motion, right? There wasn't a motion surrounding the overview of process.
No.
Thank you.
Melissa, just so I know, will the survey get sent to staff directly and the board directly from you, or do you need me to send that?
I think you will need to send that. Mhm.
And then you'll just give me the link to the survey? Okay. perfect.
Yes, and I can keep an eye on it too, and just see how many responses we're getting. And if nobody's taking it, I can let you know. So then you can maybe do a little gentle prodding.
Sounds good. We actually have, it's kind of really great timing because we do have an all staff meeting on April 21st. So it'll be a
Yeah.
great reminder.
That is good timing. So I believe we've wrapped up now, everything on the agenda. So I'll entertain, unless I've missed something, and then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Erin, for taking
Thank you.
some minutes today.
Sure, I'll try to get them to you tomorrow.
Okay.
And thank you, Melissa, for all the work you're putting in. This is, I hope going to make for a very good list of projects.
I
A very
think
complete one.
you'll get some great ideas. You'll get some great ideas, I'm sure. So thanks for your time tonight. I really appreciated all of your feedback and conversation. You made a better product for sure.
Okay. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Aye.